This is Kate. Kate runs a small bookstore in the downtown alley. Of late, she has been facing a drop in sales with fewer customers coming to her store. Kate knows that taking her store online will give her reach to newer customers. But she can't wait for 2-3 months to build a fully fledged online store. She needs to improve her sales right now. Confused about what to do, she reaches out to a professor from IIM Bangalore for help. The professor tells her that she should build the online bookstore following the Agile principles. He explains that Agile is an iterative model of software development that will give her a working product at the end of each sprint. He says that Agile places immense value in involving the customer in the development process and accommodates changes at all times. Buoyed by the recent discovery, Kate hires a team of cross-trained engineers, a scrum master, and a product owner to get started. The product owner, in discussion with all the stakeholders involved, breaks down the final product into the following multiple user stories that can be completed in single sprints. Create a catalog of books to allow the users to browse, add a payment gateway to allow the users to purchase books, and create the customer loyalty program online. The product will be potentially shippable after each sprint. The user stories go into a product backlog. The team grooms these user stories by adding finer details to it through tasks. After sufficient grooming, the team assigns points to the user stories using methods like planning poker or t-shirt sizes. When the sprint starts, the fully groomed user stories are picked up and worked on. The Scrum Master leads the daily stand-up meeting where all the team members update their statuses, which are reflected on the Scrum board. The Scrum Master's job is to remove obstacles for the team members and to track the team's progress using a burn-down chart. At the end of the first sprint, the online catalog story is complete and is shown to the stakeholders in the sprint demo meeting. In the next sprint, a retrospective meeting is held to learn from the mistakes of the previous sprint. At the end of the 2 sprints, the payment gateway story is complete too. This way, the product is iteratively completed, with new features being added while the product is in use by the customer. At the end of 3 sprints, Kate's online bookstore is completely ready and business is booming. Now that we understand how Agile works, let's look at some of the challenges faced by big organizations in implementing it.
In a company like Cisco, which is a big organization, the challenges that we face in an agile methodology is that we are not always co-located. We have presence across the globe, teams in US, Europe, and India. And not being co-located is not a great thing because there are meetings that all the team members need to attend, and not being co-located, that is not guaranteed. So that would be my challenge number 1. Challenge number 2 is, like, again, in a big organization like in Cisco, we have a lot of partner engineers working with us, and not always you would get those engineers equally skilled as a Cisco employee. They don't understand the big picture. They are not co-located again. They don't see the real need of the feature, so it is difficult to get them to be on the same page as an employee, full-time employee. So there is again some gap as far as the skill sets are concerned. The third challenge would be that at an engineer individual level, you don't know the customer need. It's the product owner who is defining the customer need, and you are given a very small chunk of work to do without seeing the big picture, why it is needed, how it is being used, the use case of the feature. Without knowing that, it gets difficult for an engineer to write the user story, which turns out to be the input for the test team, for the doc team, for the other teams. So the engineer struggles there because he is not meeting the customer, he is not meeting the product owner to get the big picture. So he sometimes fails to do a good job of the user story. So that would be my third challenge for Agile method.
Let us now look at some innovative ways in which organizations tackle the issue of remotely located teams.
Hi, this is the virtual Scrum board we use, and since our team is located half in Chennai and half in Bangalore, we use this tool provided by the Rally, and this can be customized screen. So what we do is, as you can see, the screen is divided into 3 sections. One is defined, in progress, and completed. Exactly same as the same Scrum board you actually use it. Okay, so here you can see one section at the top. This is an user story, and user story can have a number of tasks. So these 2 user stories are single tasks, in which this one is in progress and this one is in a defined state. So let me scroll down, and So here you can see one user story which has multiple tasks. So typically it will be like design, planning, and unit testing, and so in the implementation also you'll have split up into multiple tasks and all those things. So you'll move that user story from from the defined state to in progress. I'll just demonstrate how to do it. So this is exactly, so we just drag it here, that means this is in progress. So this is the burn down chart. I mean, ideally, at the line shows how the rate at which it should burn down, and this blue task talks about how much is pending to do. So right now it is progressing. I mean, we are not up to the mark actually. So we are going a little slow compared to the planned one. Apart from that, Rally also provides a lot of facilities where this graph shows which user stories capture the bulk of this thing and how many are minor, and each user story, let's say this user story is split into two tasks. So these are just reporting facilities by Rally. See, the ideal thing is the team should be collocated and within the same room, and people should talk physically, and actual Agile recommends don't use any tools. So, but it is not possible for us because the teams are spread across. So the first thing what we did was we tried for doing the telepresence, but the cost is high. Then it turned out to be, then we came up with an idea, why don't we use this virtual scrum board. We explored this, and we got a big TV, and so that the team members, when they start using this one, the normal tendency is they try to take the call from the desk and actually log in into the system. So what we did was we put it on a TV. Everybody has to come to the room and stand up there. Nobody should touch their PCs. Only the Scrum Master will project it.
An important criticism of Agile is that documentation is not given enough importance. Let us now do a comparison of how documentation is done in Agile and waterfall methods.
So from a documentation perspective, definitely waterfall is very beneficial to us. This is because in waterfall, even before the development starts, and even before development starts and the release is committed, the requirements for the release and product requirement documents, functional specification documents with a lot of details about the features and what the customers are looking for is initially available even before people commit features for the release. So because of this, documentation finds those inputs very useful, versus in waterfall, what you get towards the beginning of the release, you don't get such extensive documentation from the customer facing people within the project. From the marketing teams and the SMEs who are on the project, you have to completely rely on the tracking tools which give you user stories, and many a times these user stories are just one liners about the feature, which is clear to the teams that are working on them what they are, but it might not be clear to an outside person who is looking at the user story. So the lack of that kind of extensive internal documents in the Agile world is what is a setback for a documentation person. But in waterfall, that is not a problem. It is also because of the timelines that you find in a waterfall model, timelines for the release that you find in a waterfall model, which is very useful. In Agile, the documentation person is expected to finish her write up about the feature as and when the feature is complete, which can be a 3-week cycle or a 2-3 week cycles and things like that. But in waterfall, this expectation is different. You get over a month's time or over 2 to 3 months time to finish the same work, and throughout the process you get to see how the feature is being developed, what was the the whole cycle through which the feature went through and what it eventually evolved to be. For example, in Agile, sometimes a feature is developed, and in the upcoming iterations somebody decides that part 2 of the feature didn't work very well with part 1, and they decide to change the whole thing completely, and in iteration 3 the feature looks completely different. But that is a problem for documentation, because in each iteration you've gone and changed your documents, which is actually very redundant, and what you should have been documenting for the customer is only what happened in the last iteration where the feature was complete. So these sorts of problems don't are not to be seen in the waterfall world. This is a very Agile specific problem. So because of these drawbacks that documentation team faces in the agile world, lately there have been many different creative ideas that they have used. People have used to bring change in the process, and in educating the teams about how documentation should be integrated with the development and test teams. And in multiple business units, even within Cisco, these process changes that have been implemented have helped documentation gradually fit into the agile world. Some of the changes that they've brought in is in the tracking tool where the features, the requirement for the features are entered. New flags and fields have been added, which are used as indications for the documentation team to let them know whether the certain feature impacts their work or not. For example, if you have a feature that is a user story being entered into the tracking tool, which is a completely internal, backend related work that doesn't really impact customer directly to the customer. Those features have been marked as non-doc impacting, and because when over time when multiple features are marked like this, we use filters within the tool to filter out the features that actually impact us. This makes our work much easier. We can pick out features that are directly impacting us. Some of the other changes that they have impacted is they have brought in is for every feature that is created, documentation being part of the acceptance criteria for that feature is made mandatory, which means that until the documentation team signs off and says that yes, we have got enough inputs for this feature from the teams and we can continue with our work using the inputs that have been given to us, until documentation team does that in the tracking tool, that feature cannot be marked as complete by the development team or the test team. This puts a lot of pressure on all teams to make sure that documentation is closely integrated, and it is like a mandatory task for them to ensure that we get the inputs we need. This means we don't have to go after them or trouble them for any of the information, and the process is much smoother because of these changes.